to partner up also in geopolitical questions. And we can't have a situation where we just call for our African friends when we need them in Ukraine, for instance. We should engage more heavily in all these agendas, some of them mentioned by the Prime Minister, the need for reform at the FTA, the financial architecture, the need for reformed UN, etc., building up capacity within the African Union, supporting your president, which is very strong on this. We have to move from aid to trade. We have to create an Eastern Africa single market. I mean, this is one-to-one our philosophy, and that's what have brought prosperity to Denmark and Europe, and we support our
but just a follow-up, just a quick follow-up question here, because almost every time the Danish government talks about Africa, it mentions China in the same breath. You've done it here as well.
Ask me about it.
Yeah. Published a piece in a Danish newspaper under the headline, quote, China is actively strengthening its position in the important Africa. It is essential that Denmark does the same. So my question to you is, can you understand if some people think it's difficult to establish an equal partnership if the premise of your involvement is to reduce Chinese influence rather than to help the African countries?
But that's not the most important argument. It's an argument I use primarily today because you asked me. I mean, there are two good reasons, and one of them is, idealistic. We're all humans, and it's a part of our DNA, and that's why Denmark is among it's a handful of countries in the world meeting the UN request on 0.7 for ODA, but it's more than that. I mean, this is our neighbors, and I gave you the figures. When this population grows into be, the biggest continent on Earth, 1/4 of all citizens in the world, 1/3 of all youngsters, then it goes without saying that we need to establish a more equal neighborship. For two reasons. One is to avoid what could be an outcome if there's not a prosperity future in Africa, a huge migration pressure on Europe. And another, which is equally important, is that this is an opportunity. I mean, dealing with our neighbors is the most obvious thing to do. And in 2060, there will be 1.1 billion people in the middle class in Africa. It comes with huge opportunities, not least for a country as Denmark, with our strongholds in greening the economy, etc.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's not just to avoid that someone else become a closer friend to Africa. It's because it is in our own selfish interest to be a good partner. And that's why the ambition is to move this relationship to a friendship. And I think the preconditions are pretty good because we have a strong history. We have not been colonizing Africa. I mean, the Nordics have a good reputation in Africa.
Okay, and we're already deep into overtime, so just briefly here, in the end, two key drivers for stronger partnerships between Africa and Europe. What would you underline or emphasize there?
I think we should look at it in the sense that it should be sustainable. Whatever we do, how we engage, it should be sustainable. We should be become aware of the ecological challenges that we face globally, and therefore the green agenda, the green initiative is absolutely critical, because it's not just physical conflict, human conflict that is generating problems, but conflict is also being accelerated with the ecological challenges that we face. So to me, these are very critical areas that we need to look at. Let me also just quickly flag something. The competition is healthy, even amongst friends. It's a question of how you structure this process. And I would say what he says, what my colleague here has said is that as other players come into the arena, let us focus on what are they focusing on, what are they targeting, and what is the niche that Europe can target, and how meaningful can it be. And because quite a number of situations are causing desperation in Africa. Let me give the very critical example. We have 16 landlocked countries in Africa. And not too long ago, two of our neighbors, Kenya's neighbors, that is Ethiopia and Somalia, have gone into a tense moment. Now, what, for instance, can Europe do? Because the challenge here is how do the landlocked countries get access to the sea to deal with their legitimate rights of global trade? These are fundamental issues. And at the same time, they have to do it through a negotiated process because they have to recognize the territorial sovereignty of these individual countries. What, for instance, would Europe be doing or considering in terms of looking at the investment infrastructure that would help ease such a problem?
Yes, and I think perhaps later on, excuse me, I hate to interrupt you here, but...
So let me, just that extra minute, I want to bring it, because you see, this, when we look at infrastructure, perhaps this may now even re-engineer the strategy around infrastructure. There's very little trade amongst African countries themselves. We have the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, but the percentage of intra-African trade is very little. So that means the connectivity levels are poor. That should be a niche that Europe should capitalize on, so that they can help in that interconnectivity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, that concludes this segment. Thank you very much for sharing your perspectives. And while the two foreign ministers leave the stage, I would like to welcome the Danish Minister of Development Cooperation and Global Climate Policy, Dan Jørgensen, and Chief Minister of Sierra Leone, Dr. David Senke. Please make your way to the stage. David Senke has taken the global stage as an example of the transformative potential of young African leadership. He's author to the book Radical Inclusion. He has a PhD from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he has a wealth of experience negotiating solutions and finding innovative ways of unleashing the potential of African youth and